Welcome to the Central Seminary Podcast. Today we have a special episode with one of our alumni, Paul Harmon, who's a missionary down in Uruguay, just to share a little update from his ministry and just to share some of the excitement of what God's doing down in Uruguay. So Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And it's great to hear, as you got to share in chapel, just some of the ministry and some of what's going on. As you've been now, it's 18 years you've been
Correct.
in Uruguay. As you graduated from Central and pursued missions, I want to hear a little bit about that process and then what some of the things are now. So you graduated in 2002, was it?
Yes.
Graduated MDiv, and your wife as well was student with you. What was that like having your wife? You were married at the time or not yet married? What was the dynamic?
Not married.
Okay.
Not married.
Had you?
In fact, I was interested in her during undergrad at Northland, and at one point we sat down my senior year, and I asked her the junior-senior banquet, and she said, "Not now, if ever." And so I kind of put that aside, and I didn't know what the Lord would have for me other than that I wanted to keep moving forward in ministry, and came to Central. And I was here a year, and a year later, who shows up on campus but Joanna? And I was a little upset with the Lord. Why did you bring her back into my life? I was still interested, but obviously she had said not now, if ever. And the Lord brought her back on campus. Long story short, we started talking, and we were already friends, but the Lord started knitting our hearts together, and I started attending Berean Baptist there in Brooklyn Park and started serving together. And long story short, the Lord led us together into ministry.
You were in the MDiv, and she was in biblical counselling.
Yes.
Did you have any similar courses, or is it just in hallways that you were?
It was mostly in hallways.
Yeah.
Just on campus.
At that time. Yeah. That's really neat. And then when did you get married?
It would have been after I graduated in 2003.
Yeah. Oh, neat. Yeah. So you're newlyweds. You've just graduated from Central, and you feel the Lord calling you to ministry. What was that direction or ideas, or maybe even how that shifted? Did that shift during seminary? What you thought the Lord how He was going to use you?
During when Joanna graduated from seminary with her master's in biblical counseling, she had been interested in going into missions, but for her, the real difficulty was her being willing to say that the Lord might direct her elsewhere besides Uruguay, and that was really tough on her. And so when she graduated, she did a missions survey trip to Europe. In fact, she was there during 9/11.
Okay.
She was in Austria at that point, and visited Germany and Austria and France, and my parents there were missionaries in Holland, so she visited there as well. And came back, and while she was over there as well, I had the opportunity to go over and visit and be there part of that time when she was there. And that, of course, helped with our relationship.
Yeah.
Helped knit our hearts together because she really got to see me in my cultural setting, if you will, from high school years. And so that was taking place in her life. But at the same time, in my life, I was also interested in whatever the Lord would have for me, and specifically in missions. And so I did 2 survey trips to Uruguay.
Yeah.
Part of the reasoning was, if I'm going to be interested in Joanna, I also need to know where she comes from and her cultural background, and because she was born there in Montevideo, Uruguay. And did 1 trip in the winter and 1 in the summer. And really during those survey trips, the Lord confirmed in my heart that I needed to be a missionary in Uruguay. And so I went before our sending church, what would become our sending church, Berean, and I expressed that the Lord had been working my life and that I felt the call to missions. And I said that in a church service, and there was another girl there in the church, and she looked at Joanna and says, "Do you believe him now?" And so that was kind of the beginning of then her being willing to look at me more seriously, and the Lord directed us together, and now we're in Uruguay. So
yeah, you had Netherlands, you had Dutch in your vocabulary.
Yes.
That doesn't quite translate to Uruguay. What did you have to do there in learning Spanish?
Well, actually, strangely enough, it did.
It did, really?
Because in the Netherlands, there's the European culture, and in Uruguay, there's a large segment of the population that are Spanish and Italian, and there's a lot of Europeans in Uruguay.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Uruguay, there is no longer any indigenous population. The conquistadores, if you will, they came in and wiped them out back in the day. And so it's always been European background and culture. So when I went and visited Uruguay, I felt very much at home.
Yeah.
I felt like I was diving into a similar people and culture and foods. They have the pasta and they have the pizza and they have the gelato ice cream and they have all of these wonderful things that just really helped me feel at home there in Uruguayan culture. So it was a good connection that way.
Yeah. So moving for you've got graduation, getting married, and then the mission trips to survey trips of doing that, and then getting to the field. There's deputation. What did that look like? And as far as even you mentioned Berean Baptist.
Yes.
And then is that something working with the church there to say, hey, we'd love to be sent from here? Or how did that dynamic even begin of pursuing? This is the early stages of that missions.
So during seminary, I was actively involved here at Fourth Baptist originally for a year or two, and then I made that transition over to Berean. And my thought was, originally when I was born, my dad was in church planting in Madison, South Dakota. It was podunk, middle of nowhere type ministry. And he had wanted to go into missions, but didn't feel prepared. So hence he went to Madison, South Dakota. But later, my older sister, she got sick with liver cancer. The Lord used that to move us from Madison, South Dakota within a week's time to the University of Minnesota hospitals where she could receive treatment. And it was there that the Lord directed my parents to become more interested in missions once again. That directed us to the Netherlands. So that opened us up to then making that transition to the Holland. I came back, did college, post-grad, did those survey trips, told Berean about our interest to go to Uruguay. And then at that point, I was working a security job here in the cities. And the Lord used that to provide for me during college and seminary. He set me up with a great base. And then the mission said, when we joined the mission, they said, you really need to have about a third of your support raised before you can leave your secular job. And at that point, when we got to that point, it was really neat to see how the Lord provided. Our sending church, they said, we would like to offer you the ministry home, that you could stay in the basement. And then friends of ours, David and Christy Flink, who are missionaries also in Chile, up in the northern part there, they were living upstairs. We were living in the basement. And the Lord used that then to provide so that we could go and start full-time deputation. Yeah. And our deputation process took us 4 years, which was a little bit longer than most at that time. But our goal was to stay within a day or a day and a half's drive here of the Twin Cities and keep that base local so that when we come back now on furlough, it would be an easier process.
What is that like coming back on furlough? You've gotten to have a couple of those opportunities. What's some of the shock maybe that you go through stepping back stateside?
Okay, so it's not just stateside. Something I think a lot of folks don't realize that you're also you're doing dual ministry because we also have the ministry ongoing while we're here in the States back in Uruguay. And this time around, we've been blessed that we have field replacement missionaries, Peter and Gail Tidd. They're with our mission board, Baptist World Missions, and they've come, and they're kind of a stabilizing factor. They're up in their 70s. Retired. They used to be in Venezuela, served in Utah. So they have all this great experience. They speak Spanish. And when we left, the week later, they came and lived in our house. They're living in our house right now, and they're keeping the ministry going. The only drawback is they can only be there for 3 months. And then after that, we had to do some administration, and I reached out to different pastors and missionaries. And these 8 months that we're back, different folks will be filling in for us every Sunday except for 4 weeks. So there's that aspect. Okay, we need to keep that ministry, that infrastructure going. And then on the state side, as we come back, there's always a little bit of culture shock as you re-enter into the culture. And fortunately, this time it's been relatively light. We're still getting our legs under us. We've been back about a month. And our sending church has a wonderful ministry of providing vans for us as we travel. It's been a huge blessing once again. Wonderful sending church, Berean Baptist. And then also there's the process before we come back, about usually 6 months. I try and start calling the different pastors of the churches that support us and saying, hey, would this date work? And it's a lot different than on deputation where you're cold calling or trying to establish relationships. Now we have those established relationships. This is our fourth time back on furlough. And what a blessing it is to go back, and some of those pastors from deputation are still in the same churches. Some of them are not, but we have those established relationships. Folks know us. They prayed for us over 18 years now, And what a joy, what a blessing, what an encouragement for them to just come up to us and say, hey, how's so-and-so doing? And in turn for us to go and say, hey, how's your kids doing? Where are they at? Where's the ministry? And to see how the churches have either grown or declined, and to become able to come alongside and say, hey, we are the extension of your ministry. We're not necessarily pastors on staff here locally, but we feel like we're pastors in Uruguay serving as extension of your ministry. And to just encourage churches here about the importance of missions and to have the focus on what is truly important to see that gospel outreach, not just locally, but around the world.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're actively still ministering in Uruguay, being here. What does the ministry look like? I want to hear about that. What is the shape of your ministry there in Uruguay? Even just help put us on the map. In Chapel, you gave us a little bit of context of big city, small city. What does that ministry look like in Uruguay?
So Uruguay is a buffer country between Brazil to the north and Argentina just across the River Plate there, and then we're bordered by the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a total population of about 1.4 million people. Our particular town is in the interior, right in the center of the country, so we're the Harmons in the heart of Uruguay. And our town is 38,000 people. And the Lord has just brought us a steady trickle of people. We don't have a booming ministry, we don't have hundreds of people, but the Lord has just brought one after another. And this last term, for example, right across the street from our house, we had a foster home. And over the course of the past 4 years, we've been able to work with over 14 foster kids. And what a unique ministry that's been, as the Lord has just brought one in and taken one out, and to be able to give them the gospel in some really, really difficult situations. And then also to have in our community, just 45 minutes north of us, they put in a paper mill. The Finns came in and did that, and they invested $1.3 billion into Uruguay, and specifically close by there in our community. So that's made it in some ways a little bit more difficult financially because there's the boom. And then as they completed the work on that factory, a little bit of the bust.
Sure.
But what that's done is it's created more opportunities in our community for the best and the brightest to come and hopefully stay because of the fact that we're in the interior. There aren't as many opportunities. I think a lot of times what differentiates the United States from other countries around the world is we have a richest of opportunities. There's so many opportunities, but you go into, and I hesitate to call Uruguay third world because it's really not, but there is a lack of opportunities in education, in jobs, and because of this paper mill coming in, because of universities and different colleges starting to come into our community, Lord willing, we'll be able to retain some of those best and brightest and see our church continue to grow.
Oh, yeah. I imagine in 18 years, you've seen shifts. You mentioned some economic shifts, but how has that even impacted the church body in terms of seeing some of those shifts over that tenure?
One of the greatest things that we see, and it's been a real hardship, is with the men. Their job situation is such that they'll work not Monday through Friday, but Monday through Saturday. I'm thinking specifically of one man, he's a truck driver, and the company that he's working for, it's not uncommon for him to work a 24-hour shift followed by 5 hours off and then maybe 48 hours, and it's destroyed his health. And because of those long hours, then it's very difficult for him to make it out to church, which in turn makes it very difficult to disciple. And so it's impacted what we can do with men. So our ministry has a lot of times been towards children, towards teens, towards women, and my wife is ideally suited for that. But to really see that next generation of leadership be developed. And the other thing that we're facing in Uruguayan culture is it's such that marriage does not exist. There's the alphabet soup of different relationships, if you will, taught at age 3. And so I can count maybe on two hands the number of folks that I know that are in their first marriage across all the churches in Uruguay. And so for those folks to be qualified, you really do need to build them from the ground up and build a Christian culture, Christian community. And we're starting to see that in some churches, but in our church we haven't been able to develop that yet. One of the exciting things that's happened this last term, however, is in previous terms we've always been renting. When COVID hit, we had to reduce our occupancy of our building down to 1/3, and then we also did open air, and then we came back on furlough, which would have been 4 years ago, and we said at that time we're going to get rid of our building, we're not going to rent. That allowed us to save money, and then different churches here in the States came alongside of us, and during this last term we were able to purchase a building. And it's something we've been praying for a long time, we've been searching for. It's centrally located right downtown, which is so important because of transportation issues. Not everybody has a vehicle, and most people are walking, they're on their bike, they're on the moped. So we're centrally located right in the middle of town. Everybody can get to us, and we've been able to make the front of our church building look very attractive. We had a muralist come in, and he drew a beautiful painting of Jesus, the great shepherd. And it says, "Come unto me, and I will give you rest." And in our society, there is a real anxiety continually present, a lack of peace. And so to have that out front, oftentimes we'll see folks walking by and like, I want a selfie, with that mural of Jesus, the Good Shepherd. We're hosting services. They'll look in through our window. They're curious, and we're starting to get visits off the street. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. With those difficulties, what does discipleship look like? What are some of the shapes that discipleship can happen? There's a time element, but what might that look like in Uruguay?
Yeah, so it's grabbing people when they're available, and a lot of times that'll be on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. A lot of times that'll be at some point throughout the week, and it's going over to their house in the evenings and sitting down and drinking the national beverage, which is mate. It's the green tea, where you just sip out of a gourd out of the same straw, and it's great.
Have you acclimated to that?
Oh yeah, I had to do that before I got married, of course. But yeah, you do. Of course, you don't drink it if you're sick. You don't share if you're sick. Okay. So there are some things that keep you healthy and whatnot. But usually it's done between close friends or fellow believers. And so we'll sit down and we'll have home Bible studies, and that's a neat way because a lot of folks at that point are not as concerned about the clock. And if you pick the right time when they're available, you can sit down and a good block of time, 2 hours. When we first came to Durazno, and this is going to sound almost heretical, the least important day of the week was Sunday because it's a secular society, and so they have not grown up with going to church. That had no connection with them. But what we could do is we could go into their homes and do these Bible studies throughout the week, and that's really where our ministry started and really took off. And over time, we've been able to teach, this is the Lord's Day. It's not just family day. It's not just when you sit down and do barbecue with family. It's also the Lord's family. It's important. And so we're slowly but surely building, and the Lord is blessing.
Thinking of your seminary education, what are some of the ways that you are discipling, even on a theological realm? If somebody's saying, hey, I want to learn a little bit more, I imagine there's probably not a Bible college that you can just extend to, say, hey, go there. What does that look like for you structuring some theological training for the church family?
So when a person shows interest in the gospel, of course, the first step is salvation, and then baptism, and then church membership. And what we're dealing with right now is a lot of times the folks don't make the connection between church membership and the Lord's Supper. And just to be clear, I'm close. I'm not closed to communion, but they see that as something added on, something man-made, that church membership. But I believe it's very important if we're going to have unity in the church that the folks understand what they're being a part of. So we'll sit down and we'll work through a church doctrinal statement. And that's something that we've worked on. It's something then that I go through. I tap into my training that I had in Central, and I need to make sure, though, that I'm doing it at a level that's accessible. I remember, I don't know if it was Dr. Clearwater's back in the day, but someone like him said, you need to keep the cookies on the bottom shelf. And so that's the challenge. Yes, you want to go deep, and you need to know the theological concepts, but you need to keep it accessible. And it's been a real joy just sitting down with folks that are new believers and going through the different doctrines and explaining them to them, and then hearing their questions from a secular perspective for folks that have been unchurched, don't have any of that background. And then as they express maybe social or cultural difficulties, secular problems that come up, to be able to address that at deeper levels.
Yeah. As you think back to even some of your studies, was there anything that unintentionally prepared you for the mission field, just as you were in those study sessions, maybe late nights, or courses that you're like, hey, what might this? How might I use this? But that now you look back like, hey, that was really helpful. Many years later, maybe.
Sure. Well, I maybe not me necessarily. Although I'm sure there were some things I loved. The systematic theology courses that I got under Dr. Bauer, that was a treat, and I continued to use that. But thinking of my wife, she did that master's in biblical counseling, and she has tapped into that a lot of times as we deal with folks that are suicidal. We're 40% above what the United States is in terms of suicide, a lot of hopelessness because of these lack of opportunities. You think of situations where the home is so fragmented, where there are couples living together and it's usually their third or fourth relationship, and then you have the kids involved. And to be able to come alongside and give just some hope. I think that's something that's really emphasized, in courses that we're taught. As you go and reach out to a person, you really need to emphasize there is hope. Yeah. There is hope in salvation. This is not just a disorder. A lot of times we need to be honest with them and help them to realize this is sin. And disorders, they have medicinal or other long-term coping strategies. But if you can say this is sin, sin has a cure through a Savior. And so those are important things that we took away from our training.
Oh, neat. You mentioned one maybe classmate, the Flinks there. Are there some other classmates that you still are able to rub shoulders with? Maybe that's furlough side or even keeping connected from overseas.
Yeah, it's been a real blessing over the years. I think of Roberto and Patricia Coelho. Just was able to get back together with them this last Saturday. Yeah. They've been a real treat. David and Christy. Who else is along? The Scots in Thailand. We haven't touched base with them for a while, but it's good to see them still serving the Lord. They're in Thailand.
Our church just voted to bring them on for extra support on Sunday, so that's neat. Good. Yeah. Oh, that's neat.
There's definitely a cadre from my years when I was here.
Yeah. Oh, that's really sweet to hear just some of those connections, the way that God's continue to bring that. As you mentioned some of that discipleship, and you mentioned the mate, you also mentioned the extended time. I imagine there's a little bit more than just the green drink, if it would be. What else about even just South American culture with the food culture that's there? How does that enter even into some of those Bible studies or opportunities to get together with some of the folks?
One of the ways that I can get men together as opposed to women is you invite them for a barbecue, the asado.
Okay, so the American, that's the same.
Yeah. Well, it is and it's not, because here, we have the barbecue briquettes.
Yeah. What's an asado? What flavors? What's happening there?
So there, you don't just have your little grill. You have this whole. It's a big grill with a chimney on it. It's a one-story thing. It's like 2 meters wide by 1 meter deep. And on the one side, you have your brazier, and you grab your eucalyptus wood, and you put it in there, and you start the fire, and that wood burns down over the course of maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, and then you take the coals that have dropped down, and you put them underneath the plate where your grill, where your meat is, and you have short ribs, and you have chorizo, which is not the spicy Mexican-type chorizo. It's a Uruguayan homemade chorizo. And then, I'm getting water in my mouth right now thinking about it. And if you have the kids, you might throw in a hamburger or a hot dog, but that's not quite as common. And you have your different cuts of roasts and whatnot. And maybe some of the more uncommon cuts up here, which would be tripe and kidneys and heart and tongue and all the rest of that good stuff. And then as you're doing that, it's just a real relaxed atmosphere. This is something that here in the States, we think barbecue and we got to get it done, a half hour and you sit down and eat. Down there, it's the experience. Think of more like your French 5-course meal, or 6-course meal. But this is all about barbecue. And you just sit down and you're drinking a mate and you're tending to the fire. And as you do that, the men will open up. And they won't do that a lot of times in other settings. But here they're in your backyard, you're in their home, and they just feel comfortable. And there's all sorts of things that'll come up when you get to that level.
Oh, that's really neat. There's one other one that I was told to ask you about, the capybara, as a meat option. What's the background with happening there?
Well, actually, it's a protected species in Uruguay, so you're supposed to not hunt it unless you're on private land. But if you're on private land or you know someone, you might be able to get some capybara, and it's technically the largest rodent in the world. It's like really overgrown guinea pig, if you will. But the funny story is that the Catholics, of course, during Lent, they can only eat fish. And the capybara has webbed feet, so it's considered fish, but it tastes more like beef. So I've had a little bit of it, and it's great eating. Yeah. Very lean meat, but tastes like beef, and it's good.
So what is the Catholic influence then? If that has a little bit of it, is that something that you would say is maybe the most significant religious identity, or what kind of a religious identity the people of Uruguay hold?
So Uruguay has two constitutions over the years. The first one was in the don't quote me on the dates, I'm horrible at this. I want to say 1865, I'm going to be off on that. But that was when Roman Catholicism was very prevalent in society. But by I want to say like the 1906, 1910s, 1920s, secularism had taken over. And so at that point, they came in with a different constitution, and they came in with the concept of what they call laico. And what that means is religion was no longer welcome in society. It was taken out of all government offices. There was no longer Christmas. It was Family Week. There's no longer Easter week. That was Beer Week. And religion was basically outlawed out of society. And so you will have the Catholic churches in the city squares. There is still a prevalence of Roman Catholicism. The other major religions would be Mormonism, and then your different other sects as well, Jehovah's Witnesses, your health and wealth gospels, charismatic groups. Those would be kind of your top religions. But by and large, Uruguay is a very secular nation. If you had to put your finger on a national religion, it'd be soccer, of course. Yeah. That's where people go. They go to the stadiums. That's their church. They're fanatic about it. There's a lot of real fanaticism. And you're either one or the other. You're Nacional de Peñarol. And so God is seen as something we don't talk about. It's personal. This is your hobby. It might be for the old folks, but it's really not for us. And in polite company, you don't talk about it. Yeah. It's kind of like politics. And so what was is no more. And we are seeing the harvest of that in those high suicide rates and this hopelessness across society. And it's really sad.
What do you hold as the hope for even your church and the churches of Uruguay? What do you see it's almost even a prayer request of what does that look like for the next 5 years of the Uruguayan church?
Yeah, so we're seeing some exciting things take place. We're now maybe the third or fourth generation of missionaries. Okay. And I think especially of our co-workers ministry, they're in Colonia de Sacramento, which is right across the border from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And there's a missionary there, Archie Perez, and Jonathan Rayfelt is there as well. We're all on the same mission board. And they have been able to do something incredible. They have 2 mother churches there in the city, and then they've had these other sisters churches grow out of it. And we're seeing now believers that are now second, third generation. And they have a seminary, which would be a kind of a Bible college level. And we're starting to see a real Christian culture as a supplant some of the secularism. And we're starting to see real families where it's husband and wife, first marriage, not divorced, and they're raising children. And that's so exciting to see that the gospel is broken in. It's made a change in lives. And now we're seeing nationals have that heart for the Lord, and they're taking that now to some of these places in the interior. That church there in Colonia sent out a missionary to the northern part, to Artigas. Pastor Gustavo Gonzalez, right there on the border with Brazil. And he started a great teen group, a great group of teens. And we're seeing from an early age, some of these young believers raised up that will hopefully form that backbone for the future generations there in Uruguay. Yeah.
For somebody that's desiring to, feeling the Lord calling them to the mission field, what maybe an encouragement or advice would you have for them? You took some survey trips and had opportunity. What are some of those things that you'd say, hey, you're not sure where the Lord's leading you, but what are some preparations they can be doing just right now as they feel the Lord preparing them maybe for that call?
Yeah, first of all is always keep moving forward. Never be afraid to jump into ministries, especially in your local church. That was so crucial, not just the theological education, but also the practical hands-on experience in the local church. That is just really key. And then, of course, do the survey trips if you have the opportunity. Don't just do a week. If you can, spend a summer, get involved, see it firsthand, and really catch the heart of the missionary for the people, see the desperate need. The harvest is plenteous, the labors are few. We've been in Uruguay now for 18 years, and for 18 years we have been desperately looking for another missionary to come alongside of us, and we haven't found anybody. And we would love to have somebody come alongside of us. I just turned 50 last Saturday, and I've still got a little gas in the tank, if you will. Lord willing, I'll have another 20 years or so. But still, we need that next generation to come alongside of us, be that a Uruguay national, be that a missionary here from the United States. Be involved in your local church, get a good education, because even if you are dealing with folks that are secular, that are not believers, maybe you have to start at the beginning. You do need that theological base to then be able to address things that are so heartbreaking, like suicide, like the alphabet soup of relationships. And you've got to have that good base. And then I would say also go in knowing that this is something that's for life. Go in with that desire to be faithful. Go in with the mindset that this is forever. Not that, I'm going to serve here for 4 years and then my time's up, I plan the church, I'm going to move on. Just be willing to invest your life, your heart into that country, into that culture, into that people.
Maybe one last question for churches that you're getting to go and visit. How can churches be invested in the work in Uruguay? You might have seen some creative ways over the time of getting to those pastors where how they present the ministry. Yes, you can come maybe every 4 years and encourage people and give a little light bulb. What are some creative ways that churches have done that as well to hold the rope for the ministry in Uruguay?
I would say, first of all, is that as crucial as that prayer support. And to do that, engage with your missionary. I have out of probably 28 supporting churches, I have maybe 3 pastors that write me on a fairly regular basis. And obviously, if all 28 pastors wrote me, I'd be overwhelmed. But what an incredible encouragement that is to me as they write me after they read the prayer letter and just say, hey, I'm praying for this specific need, and they get that specific need right. A lot of times a prayer goes out and it's like the proverbial telephone can conversation, and then sometimes the facts don't get through right. Read that prayer letter, make sure you get the facts right, and pray for them. And then the other neat thing that's happened over the years is, I'm thinking one particular pastor, he wanted to do a missionary trip with his church, and he came down first, and he scoped out our ministry. He wanted to make sure that what they had available in resources and people would fit with our ministry. And so he scoped it out, make sure everything was good. And then he went back and recruited individual people from his church to fit those needs in our ministry. And that was an incredible blessing. That was so neat to have that. And we've had different churches come down, different groups come down. But that was so crucial, just that pre-scouting trip, if you will. You can call up the missionary, but until you've seen it with your own eyes and you know your own people and you can fit the two together, that was so neat, so crucial that time.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been a pleasure to hear just a little highlight, and we would love any of our listeners. We'll connect them with you if there's maybe a name that they heard or even a connection to Uruguay. We'd love to do that. But thank you for sharing. It's great to see alumni come back into the hallways and just share some of the ways that God is working in their lives. So appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. It's a joy to hear how God is working around the world. And we'd love to hear even from you, our listeners, if there's a way that we could connect you with some of our alumni serving overseas. We'd love to make that connection for you. Send us a note, info@centralseminary.edu. We'd love to connect you with some of those missionaries, some of our alumni overseas. And thank you again for listening to the Central Seminary Podcast.